In the previous video, Eun-ho ended up injured in the midst of his investigation into Hyun-soo, and the person who found his body was Ji-wook, who immediately went into despair. I'm Nina, and in today's recap we'll be watching Suspicious Partner. The lawyer accompanied his colleague to the hospital, where Eun-ho underwent surgery that took a long time. While he waited, Ji-wook passed on some information for prosecutor Yoo-young to investigate and see if she could find a way to put Hyun-soo in jail. After a while, the office group receives news from the surgeon that Eun-ho has been through the worst, and now they have to wait for him to wake up to find out if there will be any sequel. In the next scene, we see Hyun-soo, and this time the man has been more cautious. He's set up his alibi by hiring someone to ride his motorcycle and make the deliveries without taking off his helmet, so it would be difficult for them to link him as a suspect, as there's no longer any evidence they can use against the man. Anyway, Prosecutor Yoo-young has summoned Hyun-soo to her office. She wants to see if the man is really going to show up and what he's going to say. Hyun-soo shows up at the scene and cites the alibi he had already planned, which makes it even more difficult for Yoo-young, who needs to find a way to link him to the crimes. He just hasn't managed to figure it out yet. The man receives a call from Ji-wook after going to the prosecutor's office, asking them to meet. Hyun-soo decides to go to Eun-ho's room to do so, but the lawyer asks them to go outside. Hyun-soo ends up confessing to the crimes on top of an overpass with several cars honking, and thinking of taking advantage of the situation, Ji-wook starts a fight with the man. In the end, they both get arrested. In this way, Eun-hyuk is able to take action together with Bong-hee. They have taken the key to Hyun-soo's house, and as they haven't found anything, the lawyer has decided to take a knife so that they can keep it and suddenly incriminate Hyun-soo in the future by forging evidence. The next day, after Ji-wook is already at home, Eun-hyuk tells him that they shouldn't go ahead with the plan to forge a weapon to incriminate Hyun-soo, as this could cause the man to lose his right to practice law, so Eun-hyuk offers to do it in his place, and as the protagonist ended up arriving quietly, she overheard and offered herself in their place. Later, after giving the matter a lot of thought, Ji-wook decides that they will no longer use the object, because no matter how sure they are about who is guilty, doing it this way would be like equating themselves with him and the way the man takes the law into his own hands. So the lawyer puts the knife away in a drawer in his desk. Now they set about finding something to link Hyun-soo to the cases. Eun-hyuk decides to interview the people who had contact with any of the three men in that photo, either the chef or Hyun-soo. In his research, one man caught his eye, as he was worried and asked what was going on. Since Eun-hyuk wasn't the first to contact him, Eun-ho had already done so. And then, as he's leaving, this man even thinks about the possibility that someone is making a case for revenge for something they had done in the past, but thinks it must be an absurd idea. However, he doesn't even realize that Hyun-soo is chasing him. In the next scene, prosecutor Yoo-young receives a report that the weapon from one of the crimes has been found in Hyun-soo's house, and although it's too vague for her to get a search warrant, she manages to issue one anyway, and when she finds the object, the man gets on his motorcycle and runs away. Meanwhile, Ji-wook found out about the complaint before the prosecutor went to the scene, and when he went to his desk to look for the gun they had forged, he couldn't find it. So he drives to the scene and comes across Hyun-soo's escape. Hyun-soo wasn't just being watched by the prosecutor and the lawyers. That man Eun-hyuk had talked to earlier was also hiding in his car watching the man's movements and decided to join the chase. In the end, he hits Hyun-soo on his motorcycle and runs away, so the man ends up needing help, and because of this, he won't be arrested for a trial, since in hospital he falls into a coma. Eun-ho wakes up soon after, which makes all her colleagues very happy, especially as the man has no sequel. But now, things are starting to get difficult for Yoo-young, as the press is accusing the prosecutor's office of having unduly persecuted Hyun-soo, which ended in tragedy, so the woman receives a scolding from her superiors. Later, the prosecutor tells Ji-wook and the rest that the driver who hit Hyun-soo has disappeared and they are trying to locate him, but it will be difficult as the vehicle was rented under a false identity. As Eun-hyuk investigates those who could be possible targets for Hyun-soo, he hands Yoo-young a list of people who could be the driver. The lawyer believes that he must have done this because he knew he would be the next victim and found a way to stop Hyun-soo. Over the next few days, Eun-ho is discharged from hospital and Yu-young is called into the office of the chief prosecutor who lectures her, saying that she has embarrassed the prosecution and shouldn't do anything like this from now on. Moo-young even ends up slapping the man next to her in the face to show the prosecutor how displeased he was, and we know that even she could have received the aggression, as the man has been violent towards the protagonist before. And at night, our new couple end up drinking a few beers before going to sleep, which results in them cuddling up later. The next day, Ji-wook begins to suspect that Young-hee may have planted the knife, or the other two who already knew about it, but either way, we viewers discover that it really was Yu. He decided to act, after hearing Ji-wook talking about it to Eun-ho while he was in a coma. And Yu-young, taking the case of a man who confessed to starting a fire, where another man was found guilty, spent all those years blaming himself and decided to confess to the crime, but the authorities ignored him. Now this man has caused another fire and the prosecutor has found out about it while investigating the new one. The chief prosecutor finds out about this man's confession and asks Yu-young to hush up the case, otherwise things will get worse for her. And Eun-hyuk goes to defend the man who was wrongly accused. At his sentencing appeal trial, the lawyer presents the case to his colleagues, because as he lost the first time, he doesn't feel confident about going to court again with this client. But this time, Eun-hyuk doesn't get any help from Ji-wook and the protagonist, because they both lost family members in a fire and it's a delicate matter for them. Now speaking of which, the series shows that apparently Bong-hee's father was actually accused as the person who caused the fire at Ji-wook's family home, but we don't know if he's the real culprit, as Moo-young instructed Ji-wook at the time to blame the man, and as he was only a child, he obeyed. In the next scene, the new couple decide to go on their first date, and when the protagonist leaves her lover's side for a moment, he ends up bumping into his mother at random, so Ji-wook decides to go and fetch Bong-hee to introduce her to him, but when he goes to fetch the woman, she runs off. Because at that moment the protagonist has discovered who his mother is and doesn't have the courage to go and greet her after all the time she has provoked the woman to defend her own mother. Bong-hee realizes that she is officially in trouble, with neither her father-in-law nor mother-in-law liking her. However, the day's surprises don't stop there, because when she gets home, her mother is there and so is Ji-wook's, so they make it official for everyone and Bokja doesn't support the relationship. In the evening, the couple go together to a laundrette so that the protagonist can wash her clothes and the man gives her a beautiful necklace as a present. Then when they get home, they start kissing and end up doing it. Having slept in Bong-hee's room, the next day Ji-wook discovers through the picture frame next to her bed that his beloved's father is the one who has been blamed for the fire in his house, and this shakes the man. So much so that he spends the next few days thinking about it and tries to separate his relationship with Bong-hee from the situation, telling himself that she is different from her father. As Ji-wook needs to occupy his mind, he tells Eun-hyuk that he's going to take part in the case of the man who was wrongly accused of the fire, and the protagonist decides to do the same. Meanwhile, prosecutor Yu-young has decided to go against her boss's orders and investigate the man's confession. She has gathered enough evidence to place him as a possible culprit and has given it to Eun-hyuk to use in his defense, even though she knows the risks of losing her job. Since this will cause the press to come down hard on the prosecution again, talking about how flawed their trial is. And we find out when the two are together, that the night Ji-wook caught them together in Yu-young's room, they hadn't done anything like the man thought, but the woman decided not to tell the truth, because as she said to Eun-hyuk, it could have happened. Returning to our couple, at night they have a conversation before going to sleep, where the protagonist says that she became a lawyer in order to protect people who have been wrongly accused, like her father and her. At this point, she begins to realize that there is something going on with Ji-wook, as he is acting strangely towards Bong-hee. So the protagonist asks if there's anything he's hiding from her, but the man denies it. The only thing Bong-hee can do is trust him. However, the next day, the protagonist ends up talking to Eun-hyuk, who says that he must be like this because of the arson case they're working on, which must be stirring up the man's feelings, because he witnessed the accident. Unlike the woman who just lost someone to something like this, Ji-wook was in the house when it happened, and besides, he was just a child. So Bong-hee understands and tries to understand his lover's side of the story. Later that day there's the arsonist's trial, where Eun-hyuk does very well using the evidence he received from Yoo-young. And Bong-hee realizes what's really going on with Ji-wook. She knows by heart the story of what happened in the fire in which her father took part, and it was only then that she realized that the man may have found out who her father was, which is the reason for his coldness. So she invites him to have a nice afternoon together, and at the end of the outing, decides to end their relationship, because the woman knows that for Ji-wook, her father will always be to blame, no matter how much her beloved believes he has been wrongly accused. And Bong-hee stands by her decision, even after the man says that they can get past all this. What did you think of these episodes? I hope you enjoyed the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like it and share it to help me. Until next time.